there's not a.
Yeah, yeah. unless you see someone you really don't like and you want to
Right,
keep it
okay.
up, that's fine, yeah.
I think we should check it. Yeah. Okay. Can you go sit over maybe in the blue room and do it? And make sure you brush your hair too. Okay, thank you, sweetie. You done?
All right, we got a number of folks in here already. I'm sure we'll be adding some more as we go, but in order to hopefully keep this running as quickly and efficiently, we can get started. Just a quick background, I'm David Hale, I'm with the Neighborhood Association. I have with us, and we'll have speaking in a little bit, Christine, who works with the garden group, and we'll also have Pedro Perez from Charlotte Family Housing, who's going to give a quick update on all that they're doing as well. So hopefully have a pretty good, well-rounded conversation. One thing I want to make very clear from the outset on this, we have nothing that is set in stone right now. So if you guys have concerns, if you're worried about things, questions, things that you want or that we have not addressed, there's plenty of time for all that. Don't feel like this all is about to happen tomorrow. This is a thing we've been working on and put a lot of time into, but we're not rushing this through. So there's that. And number two, we're not going to make everybody happy with this. So I don't want anyone to think we have not listened or are not willing to listen to your concerns or asks and requests, but just know that at the end of the day, we're going to be kind of doing what we can do, and some of that will be limited. Some stuff that the majority of neighbors really want, that some people might not want, we might decide to do or might decide not to do for various reasons. I assure everyone, though, that our priority is to make sure everybody's insight has been heard. So just for a quick reference, I want to make sure that everyone is aware of exactly what we're talking about. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. And give me one sec. I should have had this all set up before we started, but I want to make sure everybody's kind of familiar with the area that we're talking about. And over here too. Also, I'm not great at Zoom, so bear with me on that too. But here is what we're looking at, is this area here where this water tower is. It's on Beacon Street, runs here. Marguerite runs on the backside of this, and Stratford on this side here. So it's this kind of L-shaped greenscape right here. And it is currently owned by the city of Charlotte, managed by Charlotte Water, and we're kind of in the process of seeing what we might be able to put on this that would make it a neighborhood amenity or benefit. So the other side of that is, on the other side of the water tower, right over here, is Charlotte Family Housing. And those folks, I want to bring in Pedro Perez here, who works with Charlotte Family Housing, and we'll let him kind of give a rough idea. They are in the process of hoping to expand. They are also working with Charlotte Water, but as you'll find out, some of the plans on this are a little complicated by Charlotte Water's plans as well. So Pedro, I'll hand it over to you and give you a chance to give an update on where things are at.
Well, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to share our story. And first off, I appreciate the collaboration and cooperation that the Neighborhood Association has provided us and continues to provide us. And we're supportive of the plans that you are interested in with respect to garden and playground. I think that that's important for the community. One of the things that we are hoping to be able to do, and we have had some plans in place, but we have two separate locations, and one of the things that we're trying to do is create a campus for ourselves where we can have our administrative offices, our social workers, our housing coordinators housed in the same building by expanding that building. In addition to that, we were seeking to build affordable housing. As you all know, the homelessness crisis pre-pandemic, the affordable housing crisis pre-pandemic has only been exacerbated, and frankly, over the next several weeks into the next several months, I fear that there's going to be a tsunami of evictions, which is going to result in a tsunami of homelessness for this community and frankly, for the nation, and we're trying to prepare for that. As such, we had developed an initial plan to try and create a 24 affordable housing unit on the Stratford Street side, but that has been obviously curtailed by the roadway and the construction site that they are going to need to build in order to build the much larger water tower. And so we had to revamp, and the question had been asked earlier, what are our plans with respect to that? And at that point, when I was asked that question, we had to table those plans. We have regathered, and we're now trying to consider whether or not we can put somewhere between 10 and 12 townhomes, affordable townhomes on the Beacon Street side. The difficulty is parking, obviously, and then access for all of our social workers and everyone else. We're in conversations with the city. As you know, this is a very complicated issue, and there's a whole number of zoning issues that have to be resolved. There's also, for us, from the perspective of we have to raise the capital to be able to do either one of the plans. And one of the reasons we're looking to build affordable housing is, of course, because we need to resolve this problem as best we can. We want to be part of that solution. And the second reason is that it would afford us some stable income so that we can continue to serve working families that are experiencing homelessness. This pandemic has severely impacted those individuals in our community and in the city that are in under-resourced communities that are struggling every day. Many of our families have lost hours, have lost their jobs, and we have had to increase the support we've given our families. We now had to reduce, because of the pandemic, the number of families that are in the shelter itself at Plaza Place from what had been 14 to 7, and how we have supplemented in our shelter phase. We're a 3-phase program: shelter, housing, and then ultimately they graduate into unsubsidized housing. What we've done is with the other 14 families, because we like a cohort of around 21 in our housing, in our shelter phase, is that we are now housing in the shelter phase 14 families in hotels, and we're paying the full rent for them in the hotel so they can continue to save 30% of their income towards the first month's rent and a deposit when we move them into the housing, subsidized housing phase. That's basically where we're at in terms of our plans. They are all contingent upon what the city allows and how we can navigate the zoning requirements, raise funds, and then begin the construction, if that is all possible. Clearly, this is going to be a long-term project. If we're at all able to do it, the city is going to take somewhere between 7 to 10 years. Who knows? As David and I were joking, if the Hawthorne Bridge is any indicator of the ability to move things forward, this process may take. So we have to be prepared for the inevitable shortfalls and delays that may occur in any construction project, particularly even construction projects that are well managed. I'm not trying to indict any particular organization or thing, but the fact of the matter is that Hawthorne Bridge has been a very interesting project that we've observed. So in any case, that's where we are. I'll answer any questions you may have with respect to our plans. They are tentative, they're fluid. We have to be flexible, we have to be innovative, and we have to adjust accordingly, and that's what we plan to do. My dream is that we have a campus there in which we can house our entire staff so that we can serve our families better and become more effective and more efficient in the way we do business with our families and move more families from homelessness to home ownership. If I can just provide one small detail, one small data. We track families, we serve families for up to 2 to 3 years in our program. First the housing, the shelter phase, then subsidized housing, and then once they graduate into unsubsidized housing, we survey them for an additional 2 years, calling them every quarter. We began last April asking the question, have you applied for, been approved for a mortgage, and then have you gone on to purchase a home? The organization never asked that question until I asked the question to be asked. And 53 families have reported back to us that they have applied, been approved, and many are in the process, if they have not already bought a home, in the process of buying a home. So we've been successful at getting families to move from homelessness to home ownership. That is the ultimate goal that we want to achieve. We want more families to own homes in our community, in Charlotte, to be able to continue to prosper And that's what we want. We want to end generational poverty. We want to try to end generational homelessness. And that is my goal. That's my mission. Now, so I'm paying forward much of the gifts I've been given in my life. So thank you for listening. I'll answer any questions you may have.
And just for folks who are new to Zoom, if you look on the bottom of your Zoom window here, there's a little tag called participants. And if you click on that over to the right-hand side of your screen, at the bottom, you should see a little button that says raise hand. If you click raise hand, I will bring you on and you can ask some questions. Pedro may need to depart this a little early. So if you have questions for him, knock yourselves out and we'll put you on right away. But I'll also start kind of moving forward with this so that you guys can get a taste. Now, I don't know how clear everybody was on some of what Pedro was talking about, but for one, PMNA is incredibly supportive of what they're doing. Affordable housing in our area is one of our big wants, and we really would like to see this happen. So we are supportive of what they're trying to do 100%. The question is, how much can we kind of fill in some of these timetables? So the other thing that, and we'll get into this in a second, that the city of Charlotte owns this property. It's managed by Charlotte Water. Charlotte Water is moving, or the plan is to move the current water tower and put a bigger water tower in a different location on that property. That plan is currently about 7 years, so they say, out, which is really sort of the part where we kind of fill in the gap, theoretically. So Charlotte Family Housing is hoping to use that property. They're in a little bit of a waiting position for several reasons, but because of that future construction is certainly one of them. And what our hope is in doing this plan is to come up with some things that would utilize the space in a positive way for the neighborhood in the interim until Charlotte Water begins construction and needs to utilize that space, and then we can get rid of whatever it is that we've done there. So any significant questions or anything so far? I'll open it up if anybody has questions for, let's see, I've got one question here from Kristen. Kristen, I will,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
I was just wondering, with all the moves and what you're talking about, moving the water tower, there's that one cinder block building. Will that stay there, or is that also up for moving something around?
My understanding is that it will probably be staying there. And I will, I'm going to go through a little presentation here on it in just a moment.
Okay.
But we'll kind of show you some of the, you know, the designs that Charlotte Water is looking at right now. And I preface all of this by saying these are very early designs. I would not necessarily say any of this is etched in stone. So I'll click over here to share screen, and let me, that way we can kind of walk through some of this stuff and you guys can get a better sense of what we're looking at. So I'll bring this up here. So can everybody, I hope, see this okay? So this is, again, the space that we're looking at here. And to give you an idea, it is, as I said, owned by the city. It's maintained by Charlotte Water. We are talking about a lease agreement with Charlotte Water for PMNA to utilize this space through 2027. Now, we have not signed anything yet, and we are not going to do so until we have a final plan set in place. This is part of what they're asking from us is to be able to show them exactly what we want to do before we sign anything. What is surrounding that? Obviously, we talked about Charlotte Family Housing. There are apartments that are largely unused that are over here on, right here on off Marguerite and Beacon. And then on this area here along the periphery, you can see there's about 15 homes that have relatively unobstructed views of the property. So some of these, I think a couple of them right around here on Stratford are under construction for renovations right now. And several of these are also rentals. But it's a relatively, one of the reasons that we like this space here for use in this is certainly not that we don't, we want to prioritize what the people, the immediate neighbors think, but this is one of those areas where there's probably fewer immediate neighbors than most projects that we would do around here. What's currently being used here, it's, as you can see, a wide open space. A lot of neighbors come and bring their dogs out here to play Frisbee or play catch. If you go out any day that's nice, you'll probably see somebody out there with their dogs. We've talked to some of the neighbors. We did some surveying. Folks will just bring lawn chairs out there, picnics, stuff like that. Work on their putting and chip shots over here as well. But largely it's just a wide open space that's being used by whoever happens to live around there for whatever they happen to want to use it for. The space, it's about 38,000 square feet of unused space, boundary wise about 100 or about 820 linear feet. So let's see. The timeline of what we're looking at right now, the existing tower, FYI, is almost 100 years old. So that is not something that I had realized, but it gives you an idea of how sort of outdated it might be. So if you hate your water pressure in Plaza Midwood, that's probably part of the reason for it. They're looking at 2027, 28 as a timeline to replace the water tower. And so to answer the question that was asked earlier, here's that existing cinder block operations building. That is still in the plans to stay here. Here's where the water tower currently is, and they'd be looking to move it more to a center location. And as you can see, it's also about twice the size of the current water tower. So this would be a significant change to the basic layout there as it is. Our timeline, we're aiming for a January 1st, 2021 to sign a lease on this property with Charlotte Water. We'd be looking to have garden stuff starting probably late February or early March, and we'll get into that. And then other ongoing projects that we'll kind of be adding into things as we move along, depending on A, finances, and B, how much time and effort goes into actually putting those things together. So a quick rundown of what our goals are. We want to create a usable space for neighbors, provide resources and amenities that can be enjoyed by everyone in the neighborhood that is not super focused on one particular want or desire or demographic, minimize the impact on our immediate neighbors. That's a big thing here. I cannot say that we will just do exactly what the immediate neighbors want, but their vote will certainly count for more in our weighing of pros and cons on things than the average person in the neighborhood will. We want to create a working relationship with the city and Charlotte Water. That's a big part of this too. I mean, again, we are very eager to see Charlotte Family Housing create some affordable housing on this property if that's possible. What we don't want to see is high-priced cookie-cutter apartments end up on this property down the road. So creating this sort of working relationship with the city and Charlotte Water, I think, is important. And another thing is we're really among the first to do this. We kind of came to them and they said, all right, let's see if it can work, but there's not really a template for it. So I think we're hoping too that this can kind of become a template that other neighborhoods and community organizations that have similar footprints in their area can find good ways to utilize that space. What we cannot do because of the timeline on what Charlotte Water is looking to do is anything that's going to be large in scope, budget, or long-term stuff. So yes, I would love to see a community pool there. Unfortunately, I think that ship has sailed for us in the near term. So there won't be shops, there won't be breweries, there will not be a pool, there won't be any housing. It's got to be smaller, lower budget, and stuff that is removable in 5 to 7 years, most likely. And the other, of course, big thing is we don't want to create any sort of traffic-related problems. We know that that is a concern for our friends and neighbors who live right there. We did do a survey of neighbors just to get an idea of what kind of stuff would you be interested in. We ran this for about 6 months earlier this year, had 171 responses. By far the most desired amenity was a dog park. As we'll get to a little bit later, it was also probably the thing most people said they didn't want. So you can understand some of the problems with that. Community vegetable garden had a lot of enthusiasm, kids play equipment, picnic tables, exercise equipment, butterfly garden, putting greens, disc golf, and sand volleyball were all among the big things. Tree swings, bocce ball, artwork and murals on some of the fencing around there, little free libraries and pantries, horseshoes, and upgrades to landscaping, gardens and shade around there. Those are all ideas that people had. People mentioned splash pads, beer gardens, live music. We had one vote for actual horses with our horseshoe pit and a statue of me. I am enthusiastic about the statue of me idea, but there does not seem to be a large amount of support for that at the moment. What people said in that survey they didn't want to see, of course, was traffic and parking issues. I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment too. Dog park, I will say far fewer people said they don't want a dog park than those who said they did. I mean, of the 171 responses, we had about 110 who said we really want a dog park, and we had probably 15 who said I absolutely don't want a dog park. So that's sort of the mix we're working with. But when I say like we can't make everybody happy, this is an issue that somebody's going to be unhappy whether we do it or we don't. So kind of an idea of what you're talking about there. We had some concerns that were raised about whether or not the community garden would continue to be maintained, or whether people would say, I want to do this, and then opt out on actually keeping up with their plot down the road. Concern about late night uses, will people be there making noise late at night? There was some concerns about whether it was worth putting play equipment there for kids, given that we have Midwood Park and Veterans Park also nearby. People didn't want skate parks, basketball courts, breweries, and pizza shops, because of course Pleasant Midwood is already Charlotte's centerpiece for breweries and pizza shops. But so that's a rough idea of what our survey results are. And apologies if I'm running through this quickly, but I want to leave plenty of time for people to ask questions. So here is the area that we're talking about, with a very nicely designed overlay based on our buddy Chris Barth, who helped draw some of this, and my very meager Photoshop skills. But some ideas of things that we could do with this particular layout would be the community garden, butterfly garden here that would be up against the fence line with Charlotte Family Housing, the dog park running off of the side here along the water tower, adding in picnic tables, picnic benches, putting green or disc golf stuff over here. We talked about using this area here as a potential, putting down some turf for CrossFit or other exercise classes. We want to put in bike racks over here. And then we talked about putting in a little free pantry here. We have a ton of little free libraries in the neighborhood, but we really don't have any of the pantries. And I think that's especially now, as Pedro talked about, with the homelessness going on and all the problems that people are dealing with because of COVID, I think stuff like that would be great and ties in well with our desire to have the community garden here. I have talked and had some very brief initial conversations with the folks that do the inside out art projects. So we thought about doing some rotating but permanently installed art installations around here. Of course, we could certainly do some murals on some of the fence lines. The gated fencing around the water tower. I'm sure most of you have seen the similar art project done in Elizabeth around their water tower. I've talked to the folks who did that, and we've got some connections that we could potentially put in some art around the fencing here as well. And then the big thing over here is this is Marguerite. There is a house right here. These are all apartments over here to the side. And of course, there's no housing right here along this side. This is what we figured was probably the ideal space to have some on-street designated parking spots. Charlotte Water wants to work with us and CDOT on creating this. So ideally, if people do drive and come and visit, which we don't think will be many, if you go to Midwood Park, most people walk, they don't drive. That will be hopefully the intention with this as well, but that there'll be designated parking for this area here so that you don't see a bunch of parking here and here where there is an actual significant amount of residential folks. I mean, it is public parking here, so if you went over there today, you'd be allowed to park here. We just don't want to create an influx of parking that is not already there. As you can see, that's kind of the basics of it. The spacing here, we kind of talked about what some of these projects would be, but adding up all of the space requirement for pretty much the bulk of the ideas that we've talked about would only still take up about a third of the total usable green space in this area. So even if we do everything that is on our list of potential options, there'd still be plenty of unoccupied green space here, just to give folks an idea. Cost, again, dog park is sort of the, hey Pedro, thanks. Dog park is sort of the big bugaboo here because it is going to be probably the most costly thing. I think also it might have the most return. And costs are certainly going to be an issue for us as we move along. We have some budget for this. We've been setting aside funding for this project for a couple of years already with PM&A. So there is stuff we want to do, and we're willing to spend some of PM&A's reserves on this. We're certainly in the market for grants, sponsorships, and ways of finding other potential funding here. But as you look, some of these projects are almost no-brainers. A butterfly garden we can do for less than $500. Same with the little free pantry, tree swings, bike racks. These things are not going to be super costly. So those should be fairly easy to do, low impact, low cost. The bigger decisions are going to come in when we start talking about, are we going to spend a couple of $1,000s on swing sets or children's play equipment? Do we want to spend potentially $10,000 or $12,000 into putting in fencing and mulch and all of that stuff that would need to be done for a dog park? So again, there is a relatively reasonable budget that we have with PM&A to make some stuff work here. We do not have the budget probably, I added this stuff up to about 40 grand. We don't have that. So there will have to be some choices made within this. And then again, concerns, traffic and parking is a big thing. Other concerns, we don't want to create a situation where you've got a bunch of people sort of loitering. We want the space to be there for usage. But again, if that usage means that people who don't have an otherwise good spot to be have a place to go and feel safe and comfortable, then that's great. And we're all for that too. We want to make sure that the people who, are utilizing it, who said they want to garden, that they're going to keep things safe or keep things looking good. We don't want to see equipment being destroyed. The nice thing, of course, with Midwood Park and Veterans Park is that the county maintains it. This is going to be a little bit on neighbors themselves and, of course, PM&A to maintain it. And then, of course, the long-term question of when the new water tower comes in, what happens to all of this? The idea would be hopefully some of it is salvageable, hopefully some of it is replaceable. But the question, of course, is will we have return on investment from any of these things? Is spending $12,000 in a dog park that is going to be used routinely by all of our neighbors a thing worthwhile to us? I think there's a lot of people who would say yes. But if we're only going to get 4 years of use out of it or 5 years of use out of it, then the question becomes a little murkier. So you get an idea of kind of what some of the big issues we've been grappling with are. As we talked about the dog park, I won't bore you with a lot of the details, but fencing would be the big thing. Is putting up fencing is roughly, you would look at about $25 a square foot. We're going to look into avenues of trying to reduce that cost, potentially getting some volunteers to help reduce with the installation costs and all of that. But one thing I want to also mention here is that I've talked to a number of neighbors around that area. And again, this is a place that is already being used by people and their dogs pretty routinely. It's certainly not, a dozen dogs there at a time, but in any given day, there's probably at least a dozen people who come out there with their dogs. Those dogs are largely off leash, and far be it from me to suggest anyone's dogs are not super well-behaved, great dogs. I have my own dog who I don't take off leash anywhere because I don't trust her not to just run away chasing a squirrel. But one of the concerns that I heard from several neighbors around there is that they currently don't feel super safe walking past this area when there's dogs out as it is, because dogs are off leash. So some people are kind of against the idea of putting a dog park there because they don't want a bunch of dogs being there. But there's already dogs that are not currently fenced in. So there's, I think, a fair argument to be made that the dog park actually makes this a safer and better situation, even for the immediate neighbors, than it currently is. Again, that's just some feedback that we got from talking to some of the immediate neighbors. But anyway, you get a little idea of what some of the costs would be. We would be looking at potentially getting some businesses to help sponsor this, as we did with our dog waste stations that we put in throughout the neighborhood. We could potentially do a thing where you need a membership to use the dog park and having sort of like a key card entry. I feel like that would probably be a lot more trouble than it's worth. And we really do want this to be sort of open for all neighbors, not based on, if you can afford to pay a membership fee. But we could also do something like having regular classes with, I know Robin Lincoln's one of our wonderful neighbors here who is a dog trainer, doing regular classes there for teaching dog training and stuff like that could help offset some of these costs as well. And then, of course, there would be recurring costs in terms of maintenance, refilling the mulch, and dog waste cleanup and all of that. And then the other thing we have here, of course, the community garden is one of the bigger projects. And I'm going to see if I can find Christine. I'm going to put Christine on here. And Christine has been heading up this project, which is its own sort of endeavor. But I'll let Christine kind of handle the logistics of what they've been talking about with the community garden.
Sure. Thanks, David. So I guess I know that a lot of people have shady yards and maybe yards that aren't conducive to growing vegetables. And I'm part of the community garden at Midwood Park, and that's a shady spot that's more beautification rather than vegetable gardening. So we thought this would be a really great space to lots of sun, flat, to have vegetable garden plots. We were envisioning, and Don Bacalhita, sorry if I butchered your name, Don, is on here too. He started community gardens before, and we're really lucky to have him kind of guiding us with this. Right now, we were thinking starting smallish, 12 to 16 plots, depending on interest. It'd be great if we can expand. That all depends on a lot, as you've heard. And I don't know, yeah, thanks, David. Costs can be pretty low. The big thing is water installation and fencing, which can be done more cheaply, but if we want to do it more visually appealing, it'll cost a bit more. Tools and storage, obviously. We want to keep our tools safe. I know there's some community gardens that don't have a locked shed, and they seem fine, but we're kind of exploring different options there. We need to actually level the site, make sure it's flat so it doesn't have any pooling issues, and amend the soil. The soil looks okay, but definitely could be raised into the fertility of it. We would work with Pam Grundy, who is a big butterfly person, to kind of put kind of perennial flowering plants maybe along the perimeter so that neighbors don't necessarily have to look at vegetable gardens. Well, the vegetable gardens don't look terrible by themselves. And I just wanted to address a potential issue about maintenance. Following guidelines from other community gardens, we would have, as part of the agreement for for leasing a plot, that the garden committee would have the right to come back and reclaim a plot if it's being unkempt. There's just, there's all sorts of reasons why you don't want to have an unkempt plot in your garden. So just to put anybody's mind at ease about that. There would be probably some sort of fee associated with leasing, pretty minimal, I'd say $15 or $20. Anyway, so we're hoping to have the next few months kind of writing up the plot agreement guidelines, having informational open houses, however that's going to look in the age of COVID, for interested gardeners to find out more information about what the goals and the guidelines would be, with the goal of clearing the plot and amending the soil sometime between now and January. I put January before, but talking to Don, it seems like we should do that sooner so that we can have time for the nutrients to kind of amend the soil. And February, March 2021 is an ideal time to start a spring garden. So we would really like to have everything up by then. Yeah, is that?
That's good. I
Thanks,
think.
David.
Do we have other things? What do I have down here? Oh, yeah, and then there you go. So, and then I guess the idea would be to expand on this as things are successful, hopefully.
Yes, we'll start small and then expand in the coming years if interest shows and if it works good. This is the first time I've done it, so.
And our garden group has been great on planning all of this. And one thing I'll also add is that if you look in the costs here, the big thing, as Christine mentioned, is the $3,000 or so that would be for water installation. likely we would want to do this whether we're doing a community garden or not. So this is largely probably a fixed cost, but what this would do is allow us to have access to water on the property. Charlotte Water would essentially create a spigot use for us to have on the property there. So we would be using that for dog parks to fill up, you know, dog bowls and stuff like that as well. So, you know, the costs are what they are, but that probably is the thing that we would be wanting to do regardless of the of whether or not we're doing the community garden. So we've tied that cost to the garden, but you know, I don't think that's actually necessarily a fair thing. So lastly, what's next for us? This is, you guys get to really enjoy my photoshopping skills here. Look at that. I put about 4 minutes of effort into showing you what this all might look like when it's finished and it's cartoonish glory. But basically right now what we're looking to do is get as much community feedback as possible so that we have an idea of what exactly it is that people want or don't want, and what they're, not just what they want and what they don't want, but what their priorities are. So with our initial survey, a lot of it kind of came down to what do you want? And thinking like, well, if we do a dog park, we can't do other things. The idea here would be we would probably do somewhere between 4 and 10 different projects, depending on what the costs are, assuming that we can, you know, afford them and people want them. So the idea would be prioritizing those things as well. Then it would be coming up with a final design plan that we can submit to Charlotte Water. We are looking for grant sponsorships, fundraising, and revenue sourcing to kind of help offset some of the cost of this. Then we need to get it submitted for approval. We need to get our insurance on board and figure out what that's going to be. Get the garden and water hookup stuff done, fencing and installation, and hopefully have a number of these uses all set up and ready to go by spring of 2021. I put the link to here, but of course you guys can't click on it from here, but I will put this in the, I will share this elsewhere as well, but I did create another survey for neighbors to be able to take, and hopefully what that will do is give us an opportunity to kind of see where your priorities are. I'll try and get this and add it into the comment section here, but also I'll send out via other places. If anybody has questions and wants to use the raise your hand function, you can knock yourself out. I'm going to kind of scroll through some of these comments here so that I can address some of them. First off, one thing that somebody did mention, and it is worth mentioning, there is currently a dog park that many of you may not even be aware of that is near Florida Avenue on Shamrock. This is also a temporary dog park that is being maintained by the city as part of their stormwater project. We have actually talked with them about how they've done it. I think that there's room for both of these things, but it is something worth noting that whether we do or do not do this dog park plan, there is another dog park relatively nearby. It's a little bit probably further of a hike for some folks, but there is one in relatively within the neighborhood boundaries. Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, so some folks mentioned about involving local businesses in terms of advertising and sponsorships. This is certainly a thing that we want to look towards doing. Of course, I think one of the things that we've talked about with PM&A in terms of our newsletter and other events that we're still hoping that will happen at some point in the next calendar years. We want to be very mindful that many of our local businesses are going through a lot financially as it is right now too. So we don't want to ask too much of them, but certainly anybody that, if you have a business, if you're interested in being a part of this project, and we are more than willing to work with you on that as well. I know some of the immediate neighbors have kind of mentioned here about what the view of the dog park might be, and I can completely understand that concern. I assure you that before we move forward with any projects, we would have sort of a mock-up. But one of the ideas I think would be that it would have, of course, a fence line, and we would try to do some planting around it to sort of beautify what the subject would be. But the other thing is where we have that currently placed in our drawing would be, it is not to say that any of us are overlooking what those immediate neighbors might think, but we would be looking at only probably about 6 homes or so that would have any sort of a direct view of where that dog park is currently placed on our drawing. Somebody asked about food trucks in here or farmers markets. We have discussed that. I like the idea, certainly, of the farmers market. I think we could do something smaller there. One thing I would want to be careful about, again, we don't want to bring too much traffic that would inconvenience our immediate neighbors. When you start selling stuff on the property as well, we might run into some licensing or permit issues with the city. So this is something we need to talk about with Charlotte Water to see if they'd even be able to, if we'd even be able to do that. But it is something that has been discussed with us, and I think, particularly with the community garden, it makes some sense to kind of do something where we have, some food, farmers market type of food sales and stuff there too. Just reading through these, sorry to make this less than ideal. Anybody else have questions? If you want to use the raise your hand function, I'm happy to let you ask your questions here.
Can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
Okay, yes, I'm not on a computer or anything. Just a couple quick comments and questions. I was told several years ago about the rebuilding of the water tower by some guys that work for the water department, and they said that the water in the tower is used mainly to boost the pressure in areas, I think, north of here, not in Plaza Midwood, like you said. Another comment, I'm not sure of the exact how many people are living in the apartments. I think there are quite a few, though. They have limited parking there, so that even putting parking over on that side, which would probably be about the best bet anyway, that could maybe be a little bit of a problem for them.
Yeah, and I certainly understand that. To your first part of that, I am not 100% sure the answer. I was just, what we were told by Charlotte Water is because in general, this area has had a fairly rapid amount of growth over the last 10 to 15 years, that the need for the water tower improvements was fairly great. Now, great obviously means in 7 to 10 years. And of course, if we run into budget setbacks, who even knows beyond that? But yes, with the parking, this is something we have not even had initial conversations with CDOT yet. This is just based on our conversations with Charlotte Water. I would assume CDOT would want to study the area and kind of get an idea of what the potential impact would be of having parking there before we committed to anything.
And these 3 streets are not designed to handle a lot of traffic. I can testify that for whenever the plaza in the past, I think maybe 2 or 3 times this year at least, has flooded and traffic right in front of Plaza Place, and traffic has to detour around, and it's gridlock. It's worse than the plaza is with those bike lanes and all that on-street parking.
Yeah, and this is, we're kind of in the process of, we've talked about this a little bit, and Christine is part of the Plaza Midwood Neighborhood Association's Transportation Committee and has had lots of conversations about some of these same issues. I think one of the things, we're certainly aware that Parkwood is going to be going through Parkwood already, the upper part of Plaza is already going through a lot of construction. Parkwood will be doing the same in the near future, and what that potential impact might be. We don't want this to turn into a high traffic area. I mean, that is maybe our biggest concern right now.
We definitely don't. This has been I apologize for cutting you off there.
No.
This has been a quiet, safe, calm, easygoing neighborhood for decades. And the last 10 or 15 years, it is not, I felt less safe. It's been less quiet. There's been more foot traffic, vehicle traffic, and you're looking over your shoulder all the time to think, are they casing the place? Are they casing the place? And there have even been, I don't know if it was homeless people or just people going out there hanging out, sleeping against the fence in the field. It's been several years since I've noticed anybody out there. There have been drug deals going on out there. There has been, for I don't know if it was insurance purposes or just getting rid of some stolen material, a motorcycle burned.
Yeah, so I think one of the things,
there,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. One of the things I think that we're kind of hopeful with this is that, you know, when you have just an unused plot of land that can become, I mean, even just a matter of dumping stuff there, I think, you know, I try to go over there and take a look at how things are being used, and you'll see trash and stuff there fairly routinely. So one of the ideas is that by doing something here and having, you know, I guess maybe the trade-off to additional foot traffic there would be that additional foot traffic also means that the area is going to be maintained a little bit better. So we would be talking about putting in some actual trash cans there, you know, certainly we would have, if the dog park is there, we would have a crew that came around to clean on a regular basis. We would potentially be doing some additional lighting that would, you know, hopefully offset some of that. But one of the things, you know, that we've kind of used as a template, of course, is that Midwood Park, the bulk of the traffic to Midwood Park is foot traffic and not car traffic. And I think that is what we're hoping this will be in terms of how people will utilize this space as well. I think Justin Perry has a question. I know he's one of our immediate neighbors as well, or the immediate neighbors there too. Justin, are you able to hear me and talk?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, fire away.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, somebody who does live right there, and as was mentioned before, in terms of what happens with traffic, I mean, I can't see how this would not increase traffic, and I think this is like a conversation where we talk about equality versus equity, and so like there's a reason why nobody that lives around here wants it. Like, so obviously you're gonna have way more people that live further away from it, so you're gonna have more numbers. But if you look at percentages, you literally have like 90-some% of the people here who do not want a dog park, and that doesn't even factor in Charlotte family housing, whose kids and families can't even have dogs. And so, like, to me, you know, I like everything else you all have mentioned except for the dog park, because these things actually can be bridges between the folks that are there, whereas that thing is kind of like something for people who aren't going to be impacted by it, but will benefit from it. And so when I think about, when we talk about having like a colonial mindset, like this is kind of like colonizing, kind of like, all right, cool, we hear what you're saying, but we're going to plow through anyway. And again, I think if we're going to keep talking about being inclusive and everything else, it's going to take a different kind of self-evaluation than we probably have done in a long time. And to me, this is an example of an opportunity that where you do look at things that will be bridges. And we do have an unutilized dog park that's nearby. And it may be a little bit less convenient, but at the same time, this is going to be greatly inconvenient to everybody that lives over here. So I know it's more statement than question, but I think it needed to be said, though.
No, and I genuinely appreciate it. You know, I
Thank
think,
you, Justin.
Yeah, I think you know, one of the big things here is that, as Justin said, I mean, again, when you look at the surveys, which, you know, this is not a scientific survey, so I don't know for certain exactly how this works out, but it has probably been 2-to-1 in favor of, you know, or probably more than that, probably closer to 10-to-1 in favor of wanting a dog park. But where are those 10 versus where are those 1? And so I 100% understand where you're coming from. I do agree that we have, you know, a dog park that can be utilized It's not super far. And this is part of one of the reasons that we wanted to have this opportunity to let people give feedback, kind of hear who we're talking to. I'm going to put the link to the survey here in our comments section. But in the survey, it gives you an opportunity to kind of say on each item, do I definitely want this? Do I definitely not want this? Or somewhere in between. And it also is going to ask if you are an immediate neighbor or not. So all of that data we will be taking into consideration before moving forward with anything. But again, look, our priority is sort of do no harm with this. And while I can't 100% say that whatever we do is going to be 100% beloved by everybody, we don't want to create a problem where literally every neighbor around there is pissed off about this. So I hope that I can't 100% answer your question or statement and say we're definitely not going to do this, but I do understand where you're coming from, and I think this is certainly at the height of things that we're concerned and talking about as we're doing it.
Hey, David. I'm a neighbor on Beacon Street. This is Adam Winters.
Hey.
Just wanted to bring up two things to kind of echo what Justin was saying. So there is that other dog park on Shamrock in Florida. And we do see the cost as being the highest cost by far, by almost triple of what the highest other, second rated highest item that people would want. Is there any way that we could potentially help sponsor that park, as being maybe more maintained, to become less temporary, more permanent for our neighbors and help point them in that direction? And then secondly, can we also potentially do a secondary voting on some of the new items that have come up via this meeting, like farmers markets or potential food trucks, and kind of send that out again? Since we're not going to start this stuff till early 2021, can we do another survey?
Yeah, and that's I'll actually add those things to the survey that I just sent out. We don't really have any responses on it yet, so this shouldn't be a problem to add some of those things in now. And so, to answer the first part of your question, I think a little bit of how permanent or not permanent the one on Shamrock depends on exactly what the city is planning to do with that. My understanding is that they're planning to build on that property at some point down the road. I'm not 100% sure exactly when that's going to happen. As anybody who has seen all the work that's gone on along Central Avenue, the stormwater project is sort of this never-ending project as it is. So until the stormwater stuff gets addressed, I think that dog park is staying there. I guess sort of to what you have said, there has not been a ton of use. I tried to go over there fairly routinely and see if it's being used, and I, more times than not, don't see anybody else there. It may be a matter of just trying to promote it a little bit better. I do think that can be a very reasonable alternative, and even if we don't do this dog park in this location, I think there are potentially other places we can talk about doing one long-term as well. I know it's something that we mentioned a little bit with the folks who have purchased the Central Crossing shopping center over on Central Avenue, where Bistro Le Bon and CVS are, about, as they look at redeveloping, maybe there's a place that they could put in there that is more in a commercial district than in a neighborhood. So these are all really good points. And I think, again, I appreciate the feedback from everybody. Would we be talking about this dog park if there was, just a couple of people who wanted it? Of course not. The reason that it's a conversation is because so many people have said that it is a want for them, and our goal has been to provide that. But as you, I think, guys have reasonably noted, that there is one that's relatively close for a number of people in the neighborhood that's not being super well utilized. Anybody else have questions they wanted to ask?
Quick comments about the dog park, quote unquote dog park on Shamrock. To me, that has always been really small, too small, and too restrictive for any dogs to really get a good running.
Yeah.
But the big comment on Charlotte Family Housing, are they going to use the entire block or just fronting on the plaza?
So right now they are just on the plaza, but the idea, I think that their initial idea that they presented was going to sort of wrap around into it would run along Stratford, I think, with some sort of like townhouse style affordable housing units and some, and then essentially the building that they have now, they were going to expand office space there and then add some affordable housing units or workforce housing units there. So that is, I think, what the plan was, but that plan, as Pedro noted, was pretty quickly scrapped because of what Charlotte Water's needs are going to be. So I think they are back at the drawing board on that, is the best that I have heard. I think, you know, a little bit of it has to do with whether or not they can work around what Charlotte Water needs right now. And they are, I think, not necessarily married to using that particular parcel at all. I mean, it may be something where they just decide to build completely elsewhere. It just made sense that they're already there and it's a vacant lot right now. So I think they were trying to move forward with that. But again, in the same situation that we're in, and that we don't want to spend a ton of money on something that we're going to have to take down in 6 years. And even if they had to build around the footprint of the new water tower, of course, as construction vehicles and stuff are going in and out of there, it's going to require a level of space and access that I think was going to be problematic for them.
Well, the way things have been going with homelessness and everything lately, they would definitely, they would almost be about the best bet, I guess, to expand onto the property. Excuse me,
Yeah.
hang on a sec. And then again, there comes the traffic issue with them, with more housing. But you say it would be more townhouse type housing as opposed to a shelter.
Correct. Yeah, my understanding, and again, you know, this was their initial pitch that I saw based on what they had sent over to Charlotte Water. But my understanding was it was going to be sort of a townhouse or like brownstone apartment type of setup. So, or garden style apartments, I guess. I think they were looking at, I don't even want to say, but because I don't have the information in front of me. But yeah, it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think they were looking at about 20 units that would take up that space and would be, you know, it would be built to kind of fit in with the overall architecture of the neighborhood. But my guess is not drastically different than what that apartment complex on Marguerite is the design of it anyway.
Okay. One other quick thing about Charlotte Family Housing too. They, in the past, they had always had I don't know if it was after end of term type party for the school kids in the shelter, or when it was, but once or twice a year they'd always have one of these companies with bouncy houses and stuff like that come out, set up in the back. And they need just the nature of the shelter. They need to have quick, easy, safe access out the back to whatever they're having. You know, just for the nature, as the nature of the shelter is. So they would need some extra free space for that. Yeah, and this is one of the things we've tried to keep them in the loop on everything that we've talked about, because we want to make sure that they're able to utilize the space as best that they can. Pedro and I were talking before we started this that there's of course some confidentiality issues and stuff that based on what they do at Charlotte Family Housing. So all of it's a little bit tricky, but our priority is that, again, I would consider them an immediate neighbor. We want to make sure that they're comfortable and feel like the projects that we're doing are not impeding on their uses already. I know we had a question here about if some of the immediate neighbors could expand a little bit on what your concerns about the dog park are specifically. So I don't know if any of y'all want to chime in on that. Doesn't have to be, a detailed synopsis, but if you don't mind sharing a little bit, that'd be great. My opinion for a dog park, I would not designate that area as and especially since this is only going to be long-term temporary, I would not designate the area as anything specific. If you just leave it open, people can go out there.
Yeah.
They can golf, play baseball, football, softball, hockey in a way, throw frisbees, play with their dogs. They can do anything. There can be a variety of things going on at once, and they are not sectioned off into this small area for this little thing. You have to avoid the community garden, though. This small area for something else, but no big areas for anything big. Yeah, just leave it like it is. Let the people that are out there determine what is going on at the time.
Yeah. I would love to echo what Justin shared with us earlier. I feel like it caters to a specific audience, and while there are a lot of dog owners in this area, for us, it doesn't provide the flexibility for that space to be used more broadly. Concerned obviously about cleanliness. I know we talked about routine cleaning, but it's not quite the same. The view of having mulch. And while there are dog owners who use it regularly, that means when they're not using it, we also use it for the picnics, for kids, for anything else as well. Parking, cleanliness, view, sound. A lot of us work from home, not just with COVID, but full time. So the increase of dog traffic is not also ideal. And we I personally haven't seen a problem with the dogs that are currently using it as of now. I have never felt unsafe. So I know Mike, Adam, you guys have strong opinions too, if you want to pipe in.
I was, well, Mike and Adam are going to respond now. Yeah, just kind of adding to that, I mean, the traffic is a definite concern. You know, like I said, I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. You can hear kind of singing right now, but even just riding their bikes, like even like other parts of the neighborhood, it's already enough when people kind of come flying down Stratford as it is. And as someone was mentioned earlier, when things are kind of backed up, the amount of traffic that comes through there, it just makes it very non-residential. And I think and that's why I said when I talked about the whole equity piece is like, in general, I'm a go with the flow kind of person on certain things. But of all of the stuff, everything else I support. But this one thing with the increase of traffic, which makes my kids feel less safe in terms of riding their bikes and things like that. The fact that, again, I don't see it as a bridge to Charlotte family housing. Again, they can't have dogs. So like, whereas they could join in with the garden and with the playground equipment or even the workout stuff, it is kind of like it's for everybody else, but not necessarily for you. And as was mentioned before, I think leaving some of that space open for the events they have, but also for just some of us who have our kids just run free. Like there needs to be some space, especially as we stay in pandemic life, where they can just run free that is not maintained by something specifically. So, but again, if it weren't, the traffic thing is the biggest concern for me more so than anything else.
All right, anybody else have anything that they wanted to, questions or, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'll say something. I'm Chelsea Winters. I face the field. I agree with everything Justin and Mallory have said. I just want to add to that, just basic aesthetic. I mean, just to look out my front window and to look at a fenced in area just for dogs to be able to run and use the bathroom. It just seems like a large amount of money to spend on something like that.
Anybody else that wanted to ask a question or had comments before we wrap things up?
Yeah, this is Andrew Cummins. I'm also at the corner of Marguerite and Beacon, right in front of where this dog park would be. I kind of agree with Mallory, Justin, Michael, Chelsea. Mainly just because, like, you know, if everyone's going to park right there, like I might not even be able to park in front of my house. And also I kind of like honestly, just having an open field just looks kind of nice, and kind of just natural. And also, I mean, I'm for community garden, you know, picnic tables, this kind of thing, but kind of less thrilled about a dog park.
The true definition of green space. You can just look out and see it, see people enjoying it. And the way the city is building, there's going to be less and less of that until at some point the only stuff green around here is going to be between the sidewalks and the curbs, the planting strip, and the bigger medians.
Well, I definitely understand and agree with you on that. I, for one, have been one to really push with the county on parks and green space being more prioritized than it is, which any priority would be more prioritized than it is at the moment. All right, well, I don't want to keep people too late. I'm sure everybody's got some things they want to enjoy for this evening. I really appreciate everybody who joined and everybody who chimed in. Again, I want to reiterate that none of this is finalized yet. You will not see things pop up there without a lot more communication from us before it happens. So please don't be worried that all of this is just going to pop up in your front yard tomorrow. But we really appreciate the feedback. This has been really helpful. We'll post this video on our social media and share it with our next e-newsletter too. I think just the general conversation about the dog parks and letting people hear where other folks' viewpoints might be is probably really helpful too. So again, thank you to everybody who joined. Thanks to Christine, and of course Pedro is not on here anymore, but thank you guys for participating and sharing your research and insight. And if anybody has other questions or wants to reach out, you can email info@plazamidwood.org and we will be happy to get back to you as soon as we can. Again, thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.